Today's conversation discusses race and culture very openly and candidly, along with some topics that may be tough to digest and may be offensive to some. We left the dialogue as is to be true to those who shared experiences and insight. The views of participants are each their own. Those views do not necessarily reflect the views of other participants, of our guest host, and may not reflect the views of Meg Donnelly in her capacity as a licensed massage therapist, of Nova Weekend Warriors, or of Meg Donnelly LMT LLC. Well, I want to thank everyone first for joining us on Nova Weekend Warriors, Ask a Massage Therapist. Today's session is going to be a little bit different than what we normally bring you. We will not be doing any of our Moving Freely series, no movement today. We're actually going to be doing a lot of listening, which I'm super excited about because I am thrilled to be turning over my hosting duties today to a wonderful, amazing human being, Cordelia Gaffar. Cordelia, welcome.
Thank you, Meg. I'm really honored to be here, and I appreciate you turning over your hosting duties to me today. You know, I was really kind of happy when I noticed the other day that about a year ago, it was like June 11th, we had collaborated on an article to really dispel some misconceptions that people had about Muslims. And I thought, wow, isn't it amazing that now here we are a year later and the world is actually open to dispelling misconceptions about everybody. And so I thought, let's reopen that conversation and kind of take a self-reflection on where are we in the world of, are we even curious about other people, or is our whole world just, do we live in a bubble, and what does that mean, and what are the ripple effects of that? So I'm curious, did any of you have an opportunity to read that article either last year or when we posted it?
What I really liked about the article was how the way you presented it just made it seem so obvious that, you're just a regular person and everybody does things differently. And I like the way how real it was.
Thank you for that. And I see most of you guys didn't read the article, which is totally fine. But, this is a really great point, Phyllis. Actually, that's the thing. Like, we're all just normal people, and we all pretty much have the same thoughts and feelings. It's just our experience of life can show up differently. So I have a visitor, so you may hear some joyful singing in the background. I also have 6 kids, so my 6-year-old comes to visit me quite often. So you don't have to feel compelled to share yourself. That's all right. She's having a wardrobe change. Yes, darling. Okay. You can make what? She can make cakes. All right. So basically what I wanted to do today was really talk more about what other ways we are the same. Let's focus on the similarities and not the differences. So even if you didn't read that article, when it comes to what's going on in the world today, I guess more it's about Black people and their experience in the same country, the same city as you, and how it feels. I was part of a stop and listen last week with Rowan Tree. I was part of creating a bridge in communities last night with Devin Bandison. I don't know if you guys know who he is. And so it was just a really powerful event where I got to hear the other side. I got to hear how a lot of white people just don't understand that, my experience of going to the grocery store is different from yours. And I'm a pretty short person. I don't think most of you are intimidated by me, but however, I do get followed quite a bit by security, even in Wegmans. And I, you know, I often share the story about what happens when, my these are my distant stories, because I try not to talk too much about what my kids are experiencing these days. But that's why I'm always sharing the story about when my son, who's now 17, was like 2 or 3, because he's a teenager and he doesn't want people to know what's going on. But my personal experience is it is I experience road rage. I will just be driving to events sometimes where I have to speak, and if you can imagine, I'm going to present on mindfulness and how to replenish and pour into yourself. And meanwhile, on the way there, I'm almost run off the road by an angry white man, and it's kind of like, okay, let's use my tools to help myself to see to have compassion for him and understand that whatever it is that he has to do is so important to him that he's willing to die for it. Right. And so I make my driving choices differently. Right. I'm pretty sure that in the same situation, you guys are probably scared too, but you don't think twice about flipping somebody off or just maybe cussing them out, because like for me, if I do that, I know that there's more than just him running me off the road kind of thing coming at me. So I have, when I talk about replenish me, I live that. I don't have a choice. That is my coping mechanism. So, because living in this country while being Black, and just to make it more exciting, I decided to become Muslim about 20 years ago. It's it's a little bit it is really a walk of ongoing personal development and self-care all at the same time. And you know one thing that comes to mind in this moment is, quite often we hear the statistics about you know um, Black people are dying of hypertension and diabetes and all the things, right? So how many of you guys cope with mindless eating sometimes? Do you munch out? Okay. And are those things like carrots? Are you eating carrots? Who eats carrots? No. Is it more like cookies, cakes? Does that sound right? Extra glass of wine? Maybe tip over into a bottle. I don't actually drink. I'm just asking. So guess what? Sunflower seeds. Yeah, me too. um, but guess what? Wine has sugar in it. Cookies have sugar in it. I know we all knew that one. And those kind of things, right? They cause diabetes. So no one connects those dots, right? We just, Black people, they don't know anything about nutrition. They have poor eating habits, or they're self-medicating, and they are doing it excessively because, getting on the metro is a challenge. Getting to work is really painful. Enduring a full day of work is a little painful. And those are the things that we don't consider when we look at these health statistics. When we think about mental illness, these what came up in the discussion last night is there was a young man in there. I call him young, but he's like our contemporary. And he said when he was 5 years old, he went to go visit his grandfather in North Carolina. And, he lives in New York. And he saw all these guns. And he was like, why do you have all these guns? And he's like, oh, this is just protection in case the KKK comes. at night. And he was mortified. He was like, what is the KKK? What do they do, you know? And so his grandfather, because that's his life, right? He's just like you would probably say, oh, you know, like I have an alarm system on my house, right? Or I lock my door just in case of burglary. Oh, I have like 2, 3 guns by my bed just in case a man comes to put a gun to my head in the middle of the night. That's what they do around here to Black people. And that actually caused extreme PTSD for this guy. And so it just occurred to him, you know, he is a principal for a New York City school. So you think that would be enough to give him some PTSD, right? But, you know, actually he's been living traumatized with the image of my lovely grandfather, you know, has to live with guns by his bedside just in case. And, you know, he also living in New York gets pulled over by the cops on a regular basis. And he has a get out of jail free card. There's such a thing. So he has friends on the police force, and there's a card that Black men get to carry if they have the privilege of knowing someone on the police force. And it's a card that says that it's like a public disclaimer that I suffer from PTSD. I'm registered having this condition. And so any kind of, you know, emotional, anything that will tip me over can cause me to behave strangely. So in theory, the way this card is supposed to work is you flash that card along with your driver's license, and they don't harass you. Except for that doesn't always work. So you get the question of, who gave you that card? And then you give the name of the person or the badge number, and then they're like, okay, I'm going to check that, right? Because but the card is supposed to be a deterrent from being harassed by the police, right? And so it's just to give you kind of some perspective, it's a situation where you may have just gone 5 miles over the speed limit, like it happens sometimes. But because you're Black, oh, let me pull that person over. And then it's like, okay, get out of the car. You were, you know, reckless driving. Nope, I wasn't. Let me give you my, you know, I'm going to get my wallet and get my driver's license and car registration out of the dash. May I do that, sir? Right? Very slowly, very carefully, very respectfully. Then you go and you get your documentation and very slowly, very carefully hand that over. How many of you have experienced that, first of all? And did it make you tremble? Anyone ever been pulled over by the cops, and were you feeling like your heart rate go up just a little bit? Or did you know that you were reckless driving? Or were you, you know, but just know, I mean, for this guy, it was just really always intense. So I just wanted to give some perspective on that. Twice by the border control. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so these are the kind of things that, you know, people don't realize that it's not that easy. And, you know, there's always a lot of things going on for human beings in general that we don't get. And just giving grace and knowing that, you know, we're all just human, having a human experience, and we are trying to do the basic things, you know, like sometimes you're tired and you just having a cranky day, but you, as a brown or a Black person, you can't have a bad day because your frown is frowned upon differently. So I'm gonna just ask Meg to chime in here and just ask you, like, when you approached me to do the article, what was really going through your mind, and what was it that got you so curious?
Well, I think it was actually a couple of things. So I believe, and Cordelia, I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes what I remember as my own history and what really happened are two different things. So you can feel free to call me out if I'm wrong. But I believe what happened was, at the time I was doing either some blog posts where I was co-authoring, or I was turning those duties over to someone to guest blog post on my page. And then I was also interviewing some people for my podcast. And when I reached out to you, or you reached out to me, and I cannot remember which way it was, I think we were kind of brainstorming some ideas of what we could talk about that was in the world of health, wealth, or fitness. And at that point, I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit nervous in approaching you with it, right? Because I'm coming to better terms, and only recently. I grew up in an age, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go off a little bit, but I grew up in an age in the 90s when, we kind of felt like we were enlightened beyond our parents. And we were colorblind. And like, I just remember the United Colors of Benetton ads, right? And everyone's hugging and everyone's different, but we don't see that they're different. And that's impossible, right? Human nature is, we are biased, and we are making kind of, some decisions ahead of time. And so I was, one, nervous to kind of bring up, hey, would you be interested in talking about modesty and massage therapy and what your experience is like in that? But Cordelia has a wonderful way of making people very comfortable in their surroundings. And so I felt comfortable with asking you that. And I think that's the way it went. But Cordelia, please correct me if I'm wrong. Does that sound about right, or am I kind of creating my own narrative here?
No, that's totally right. You were like, I can't remember. I feel like we were at an event or something, because you had originally reached out to me when I was at Rowan Tree, and then we followed up with emails or like Facebook messages back and forth. But you were like, I really would like to collaborate on an article with you, and what do you think about telling us what it's like as a Muslim woman to get a massage, and is that okay, and stuff like that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I cannot live without massages. Like, I don't even know how I'm standing right now, because I haven't had one in, like, I'm not gonna, has it been only 6 months? It's been like this, because I was going to schedule one when I was traveling in March this year, but then the travel didn't happen. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So that's how it happened. I sidebarred a little bit, but yeah, so that's how that happened.
Yeah. And I think when we kind of started to put the article together, I loved that we did a Q&A, and both of us came with questions, and then both of us answered those questions. And the flow for me, it was just nice to be in a really comfortable environment. And I want to say this as well, that I feel so privileged that Cordelia was able to kind of come on today and open to answering some of our questions. Another thing that I've learned recently is that I have maybe put some pressure in the past on my Black, Indigenous, people of color, to kind of do the work for me, and have asked them kind of, what do I need to do, right? Instead of, it's funny because it's not funny, but in the rest of my life, I always come to everything, or when I was a manager, I would always say to the people I was managing, don't come to me with problems, do your research, come to me with solutions. We may not ultimately agree on that solution, but you've got to do the homework. And so I think one of the things I learned one, through our conversation a year ago, but, again, I'm learning again is that if you can, I feel privileged that you're able to have this conversation and help us work through some of these issues today. But it is never your or other people's responsibility. The answer could be no. I will not help you with that, and you need to do that on your own. So I think that was really powerful too. Cordelia, do you recall, was there anything in the article that stood out, that we created, that stood out to you, or anything maybe in my responses that you were surprised by or felt that was a lot different from your experience in the past?
Because it's funny, it's almost as if I didn't read the article until I posted it. At one point, I've had several iterations of my website since then, but at one point I posted it on my website, and there was something that kind of threw me that I didn't think about before. And it was, you know, where the question about the hijab for people in sports. And this is something that was really close to me, so I'll just read it. How much or how little has the recent coverage changed perceptions of Muslims, women, and modesty dress? So there's like a paragraph here. It's basically Sports Illustrated recently featured Muslim supermodel Halima Aden in a hijab and burkini. Nike has a new pro hijab, and Adidas She Breaks Barriers campaign features international marathon runner Rahif Khatib. And so my daughter, I have one of my daughters actually plays soccer, and in 2014 FIFA had actually said it's okay to wear hijab and play soccer. And but there are a lot of Muslim women that play soccer without it, except for there's one. She's Canadian, and that Canadian actually was injured and didn't get to play in the last World Cup. And I thought that was unfortunate, but that question kind of threw me a little bit, because I was thinking, it takes a lot more than a ruling or a Sports Illustrated post or article to really change perceptions. It's kind of like what you were saying. It's healing is something that is it takes time, and it's not just like, yes, it is a little bit, the more we see it normalized, the better it is. But at the same time, right, there's all those Muslim mothers who are fearing for their daughters and don't allow them to wear hijab, right? So we don't see it in our neighborhood. It's great that it's, on the racks of Sports Illustrated, but when we don't see it in our neighborhood, it's not real, right? We've got a girl on our team, like Layla doesn't wear a hijab. Layla dresses like everybody else. She's not oppressed. That's still the prevailing, so it's things like that. And I know there's like a lot of conversations right now, and a lot of us are talking about how horrible it is to be Black or Muslim or whatever. But that's not what I want you to hear, right? It's not like a pity party. What I want you to hear is, who am I in relation to that, and how am I showing up in relation to that? Am I validating misconceptions I have by, being one of, the Muslim girls on our team, they don't cover, or where is it that you can be more accountable to yourself and be part of the solution, because a lot of what you don't know about me is I actually enjoy history and I study it a lot. And becoming Muslim has really opened up a lot of resources to me where that's concerned. So I've seen a lot more of world history that we don't learn as Americans, but I was already studying it because in relation to my own background, right? And so what I have come across is there was a long period of time before slavery, like in fact, almost right before slavery, where all people in the world did get along. Like the illusion that we had in the 90s. I graduated high school in 1990, so I know what you're talking about, Meg. So, the illusion that we had in the 90s, it was a reality for centuries. So I don't know if you guys know, but Muslims, there's two sides to that historical story. But when the Muslims were over Europe for 800 years in Andalusia, Spain, that they actually it was a very cosmopolitan society where all religions and races got along. The Muslim world was the center of education. It was a center of economic growth. A lot, like our banking system is built on some of the things that were established back then. And that is the travesty of racism, is that we lose the beauty of like the synergy of the way humans actually used to live together and be together. And all I really want to accomplish in this conversation and all the conversations that I'm going to have, in this time period, is to, how do we get back to that? How, when people are like, let's get back to the good old days. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, let's go back 600 years when we all got along, like for real, So, that's really what I want the focus of today to be about more than anything. So I know I started off kind of bringing up some recent evidence of stuff, but I don't want you to really focus on that. I want this to be more about, like glimmers of light, because to be fair, I feel like this right now is an age of enlightenment. We've been gifted the opportunity to be locked in our houses long enough to be mindful about every single thing we do and putting our life and our choices under a microscope, So you're probably not munching out on chips so much anymore and eating more carrots. And while you're doing that, let's see how we can get along.
I love that. And I think to that point, I think that when I'm reading things, I'm reading something differently. And I'm so glad that you brought up the question about women in sports, because when I reread that, I thought my question completely glossed over. And reading it a year later, it did not sit well with me at all. And then for those that don't know, because I think you kind of paraphrased it a little bit, but yeah, I was like, hey, this, and this, and this had happened. But you're right. Now that we kind of have time, I feel like, unfortunately, that is a reason why this is happening now on a greater scale, because what had happened was it was the news of the day. And so 4 or 5 things happened, and then a week later or a month later faded away. And I feel hopeful this time that things are going to be different. And maybe that's because we are able to pause a little bit longer. I know for me, shame on me, but the fact that I am not working right now. And so for those that don't know, I'm a massage therapist. Massage is able to happen with with a lot of restrictions and a lot of health restrictions in Virginia. Currently, for myself, I'm not comfortable with practicing yet. I'm having trouble getting over that hurdle, even with masks, of being in close proximity with someone for an hour or longer. It doesn't mean that I will never practice, or I will, there are some people that say I won't practice until there is a vaccine. Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this is where I'm at today. But I think because I'm not going, oh, I have to get back to my busy life and what I'm doing there, I'm able to say, no, this is important, and let me put time aside to do the work and to really kind of, I've taken much more of an introspective look at myself and what my role is and how I can, no, there's no way I can ever be colorblind. There's no way I can ever say, I don't have, and I'm sure we've all heard this, right? I don't have a racist bone in my body. I can't say that. I would never do that. I can't say that. But what I can do is I can work towards being anti-racist. I can work towards acknowledging my unconscious bias. I can work towards relating to my conscious bias. And I'm coming to terms with this word right now, but I can also take a look at when I'm using microaggressions, which the book that I'm reading now is kind of talking about. It's How to Be an Anti-Racist that I'm reading right now. And it's kind of talking about like, you know what, it was nice that we could use a word like microaggression, but let's face it, it's not microaggression, it's racism. And I have to come to, listen, I'm being introspective right now. I'm coming into terms with that. And I'm thinking about the things that I've done in the past, because I think acknowledging those things is going to allow me to be a better person. But what I love about Cordelia, and I love it the way you look at things, and I'm rambling right now. I promise I have a point. But I think that one of the things that I love about Cordelia is that she is able to kind of say, yes, we need to understand that. We need to look at the history of that, but let's work towards, and correct me if I'm wrong, I can let you speak for yourself, but I always get a feeling that you want to work towards inclusiveness and work towards a coming together while still acknowledging our differences. Do I have kind of your is everything that I'm rambling about right now, because I'm really still trying to put it all together, is that in line with where you're, kind of, am I on the right path, Cordelia?
Megan, I've changed your name.
I go by both.
Okay. That is exactly the lane that I'm going in. This is a difficult conversation, and you're not rambling. I guess we're all a little bit stream of consciousness right now. I wanted to have some bullet points, and I actually put some together, and then I scrapped it at the last moment because I wanted it to be like a normal, flowy conversation. And but you're right. We do. I use the word microaggression differently because of the work that I do, right? So I'm about us facing our deep and difficult emotions anyway. And if I'm honest, I guess that comes from having to do that on a regular basis. But I notice that it also benefits other people to do that. So what I found in my work, though, is that the most egregious microaggressions are against ourselves, because you cannot be one way with yourself and a different way with other people. So one thing that I always see is for the interactions that I've had that have been really, really just horrible racist experiences, I saw so much pain in that person's eyes that they are just suffering as a human being. And when you suffer as a human being and you hate yourself that much, you look for something to aggress upon, And that is really, I think, the root of racism. It's a lot of mixed up, confused, self-hating individuals. So when I view it from that perspective, it's really hard for me to be upset with somebody else, because to be fair, like you just said, I mean, there have been times where I've just been like, I'm not going there. I want to hang out with a bunch of crackers. I mean, I'm not even kidding. And this is someone who, like, I was born in Chicago, but most of my early, really peaceful childhood memory was in Wisconsin, like a small town where we were the Black family. And then we moved to Atlanta, and I lived there for 12 years during my childhood. And I had a really interesting blend of experiences. For the most part, I would say it wasn't like terribly, terribly racist. Those things happen as an adult in the DC area, actually. And yeah, so in the beginning, it was just like, and I worked at DC law firms, so you know what I'm saying. I was like, that's like the new plantation right there. And I was like, I want to go to work today and deal with those people, you know? And that's, if I think about it honestly, that's two things going on there. I don't want to deal with being aggressed upon with a bunch of white men all day long, and I hate them too. You know, and it hurts my feelings, you know. So I'm seeing some questions come up. Can we talk about if we just don't talk about it, it's not racism. It's only racism if we bring it up. How do we become one with bring up our differences? Okay, so yeah, that's avoidance and ignoring the elephant in the room. If you have to talk about it, it's and it's not only racism. If we bring it up, it is what it is. You have to just see it for what it is. And our differences, I'll tell you, this is another thing, another benefit I believe of becoming Muslim. Like in the Quran, it actually says that Allah created everybody to look different on purpose. That was a gift, right? Because now we have a reason to talk to each other. We have a reason to be curious about each other. Because otherwise, we're a bunch of sacks of meat here for 10 decades or a couple of decades, right? I mean, it doesn't say that in the Quran. That's me abridging it. But what would be the point in talking to anybody if there's nothing interesting or intriguing, right? So yes, it's great. Look, let's see who we are, and acknowledge those differences, but not in a hateful way. That's the problem with racism, right? Because we're just like, oh, there's that Black woman or brown woman with that thing on her head, right? Or, wow, that's a pretty color scarf. I wonder, where she got that. Maybe they have it as a necktie, right? What do you think, Meg?
I mean, I agree in that, but I also feel like, there's an opportunity for microaggression in all of that. And to share a story of, I have a colleague of mine from this is in the past, but could very well have been 6 months ago. And I remember complimenting their hair every time it was straightened. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I never complimented their hair when it was curly, right? Because we've now grown up in a society where straight hair is better. And I would never say that. And I don't believe it when it comes out of my mouth. I'm like, no, everyone is, beautiful, and there's different textures and different this and different that. But that is where those hidden and unconscious bias and those microaggressions that we now have the time to look at in more detail. Am I complimenting your headscarf because I think it's beautiful? Or am I complimenting it because it's the first thing I noticed and now I'm fixated on it? And now I'm hoping that that's an intro into being able to have you do the work for me. Mm. And so, listen, I don't have answers, but I know that now I'm kind of bringing a much greater awareness to that. So I think that that's, one thing. The second thing is I certainly kept my mouth shut plenty of times in the past. And then there's a whole nother thing with social media. When do you engage? When don't you engage? That is way too big of a topic for me for today. But I've had opportunities in my past where someone has posted something on my page and it created an argument. And as soon as I saw it went to an argument, I deleted it. And I sent both people a message and just said, listen, I don't know what was going on. I didn't read everything, but I deleted it. And I had a friend of mine who has since unfriended me, and he has every right to do that, that he came back to me and gave me my words back to me recently and said, this is what you've posted. And I thanked him because I stayed silent and I squelched that information. And I don't even know what was said anymore because I did not preserve that. I didn't stand up and I didn't preserve it. And I think those are the things now that we cannot avoid any longer. And those are the things that I feel like something different is happening now with our understanding. And I'm hopeful that it keeps going. And I don't know, we're recording today is June 17th. And I don't know if everyone heard, but like bigger things are happening now that haven't happened for a while. We have conversations that are happening. We're talking about police reform. I was last night on a town hall about it where people were actually listening, and everyone with the exception of one elected official on the call were listening versus rolling their eyes and rolling off of, what was happening. And then this morning, Aunt Jemima, who basically went from showcasing and appropriating and using their idea of what a slave would look like, and an indoor slave, right? A house, a housekeeping slave would look like on their image, then said, well, we're just going to give her some pressed hair and some pearl earrings, all very European, right? We're going to make her a little more European, and that's going to be okay. And now today they announced that they're rebranding, and I didn't read the article. My husband just had told me, so I need to sit down and absorb what that really means. And that's just a gesture. But I mean, we argued to keep those images, and now we're finally making some progress. So we'll see what happens with the Washington teams, which is another day for another story. But I feel some kind of different hope. But again, this is what I do. I'm making it about me, and it's not supposed to be about me. Cordelia, I don't know if you want to speak to that, and then do you want me to go through kind of calling some people that had written some things to see if they want to explore that further?
Yeah, sure. I feel like it's a conversation, Meg, and that's totally fine. And just to what do you say? Put some salt in your wounds. I will just share this. There is an article out there that I invite you to read, which is I'll post the link, but it's there's no space for white tears here, and it's how to have these racial discussions without doing the woe is me thing as a white person. So, but I'm not, I'm just saying that, and with all the love in my heart, because these are new conversations for all of us, and we don't really know how to go about it. We don't know how to navigate it. I have a little bit more of, a holding love and loving space for people mentality going into this, because I'm open to having these conversations. What you may not know about me also is that my husband's an immigrant. So, which is a whole nother colorful world. But let's just go ahead and dig into some questions that may have come up with the rest of the time.
Great, and I'll get I will get that article posted by the end of the time here. But in going, I think the first thing I noticed was I think Nick had some points to make.
Hi Meg. Hi, Cordelia. Thanks for having me here. And Um, this is something I've been having in the last 2 weeks, ever since the uh, Black Lives Matter started about 3 weeks ago, and there has been a lot of division even among minorities themselves. Like I've seen videos where people, a lot of Asian Americans, Latin Americans, and even among African Americans who were divided among this whole thing, how they keep saying, I don't feel oppressed. I live in a free country. It's a lot free than Vietnam, China, or Syria. Why is this going on? Why don't they teach their kids about respect and all that stuff? So this doesn't have to happen. And I'm listening and watching all this from from voices who are not white, and they have and they and they're also tend to be also conservative leaning, and um, I don't know. To me, it was rarely confusing. I mean, do these people know their history about what happened in the U.S. and Canada? Would they be saying the same thing if we share a similar exposure to the history that um, you know? So, what's your point on
Yeah.
that?
So my husband's Asian. So we had that argument. We have that argument, his viewpoint is like, um, you know, our kids are born in this country. This is their country. They shouldn't allow anyone to treat them a certain way. And I'm like, yeah, that's cute, honey. But here's the deal. When people look at your 6 foot tall, really black looking son, they don't see him as an Indian, which is a model immigrant and a smart person. They see him as a threat. So, that's great to teach him that. But, and what I try to, it's really hard for immigrants, even, and it's not just an Asian thing, right? So I have friends who are from Africa, and they're saying the same thing. They're just like, so what? Because they're immigrants, right? They come from a homogenous society, and they have their own social injustices that they grew up with. So they, you know, I don't even think that understanding the history would help. I think the only thing that would help it would be to get them to understand from the human perspective. I have a lot of, it's easier to maneuver my husband because it's his kid, but like for people that have no affiliation with Black people, they're not going to get it, and they're not going to invest in it. But if you just let them understand that, okay, on a human level, is this right? And the aggressions that are happening also have to be it's not something that is, as much as I'm all in that personal development space where it's like if you have enough negative energy, you can bring stuff to you. Yeah, but sometimes you don't, because like it just, you can't control outside forces all the time. So this is the thing that people have to understand. So I would invite you to just let them understand it from a human perspective, and don't so much go into the history, because they're not going to get it.
Thank you, Cordelia. I think Shauna, I always say her name wrong, and I'm working so tirelessly at getting this better. I want to use the excuse that I'm from Jersey, but I don't think that flies. Shanna, did you want to explore what you were saying earlier a little bit more as it comes to your theater community?
Sure. So first of all, we call Broadway the Great White Way, and it was originally called that because of the white lights, but I think we've realized that maybe it has more than one meaning. But even within my community theater, we made a statement 2 years ago, about diversity, and then took no action, other than to say that we would do colorblind casting. And I'm as much guilty of using that term as anyone else, but I read a really great article probably about a week and a half ago, and I'm working on changing our terminology to color conscious casting. I was supposed to direct a musical this fall. I found out today that there's like a 99.9% chance that we are canceling it, but I had always had the intention to, it's set in the 60s. It has always been cast entirely with a white cast. And I had absolutely zero intention of doing that. And I made that statement during a theater event. It was actually, back then I was directing a different show. I won't get into all of that. I had to change shows. But I made the comment that I wanted to choose the best talent without regard to the package it came in. And we had a young Hispanic man that was in the show that we were currently doing. He perked up, turned around and walked like the 20 feet to where I was sitting and went, "Are you serious? Because I've always wanted to play this role and no one will cast me."
Wow.
And that made me really stop and think, because I guess I just never considered not casting someone. I've had another person say, well, a family should look like a family on stage. Well, you know what? Use your imagination. Last summer, we had a cast where we had one of my dear friends, actually two of my dear friends in major roles, who are supposed to be playing uncle and nephew. And one looks very much like me, very pale, very red hair. And the other is a very dark-skinned Black man. And you know what? No one questioned it. No one thought anything of it. So proves that we can do color conscious casting. But wanting to take it a step further, we don't want to cast. Some of the examples I saw were The Music Man. Harold Hill is kind of the villain of the piece. Should he be the only Black man? Probably not. That probably does not reflect well. So let's think about what that casting actually shows. 42nd Street, there's a scene that is a very problematic scene where the director is trying to get the actress to just get her head in the game, and he kisses her a bunch of times against her will. What are the optics of that if he's Black, she's white? What are the optics of that if she's Black and he's white? And really thinking about that. And I hate to admit it, but I probably wouldn't have put that much thought into it a year ago if I were directing this show. The main character of the show is definitely a little bit of a villain. He scammed people out of millions of dollars. We were doing Catch Me If You Can, and Frank Abagnale Jr. I don't care that he's white in real life. He's a real life person. Don't care. But what are the optics of him and his relationships? What are the optics of his parents' relationships? There's a lot more thought going into that casting when hopefully I get to direct it in 2021 instead. But, definitely grateful for the conversations that have come out in the last couple of weeks, that even though I considered myself to be a pretty enlightened person, I probably wouldn't have put the thought into it that I should.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Shanna. Yeah, we do. I'd have to say that the entertainment world has a lot to do with a lot of misconceptions and perpetuating racism. So definitely local theater, being mindful and color conscious is super important. And yeah, having someone that bounces checks who's Black is like bad idea. Just no.
All right. Yeah. Well, and I think that is probably an even bigger conversation, right? In how do we even move forward with TV shows and movies and Broadway the way things were originally written, or like, do we have someone aggressively, kissing someone else? What's the context of that? Those are
here, actually.
Yeah. So those are definitely, we're not going to, I love to, we're not solving anything. We're just having a conversation today, but I think that's definitely something that we need to kind of, that someone needs to explore further. Well, let's move on to Phyllis. Phyllis, did you have additional comments or any questions or anything? You had some wonderful points in your chat.
Thanks for the time. I want to push back a little bit on the history part. I really respect what you're saying, Cordelia, about touching people, the human side. And I think that's really important when you're talking, to a particular person one-on-one. But what I learned in law school that completely changed my perspective on things is that a lot of what we perceive as anti-Black is really white supremacy. And I think there's a big difference because, you know, one is like everyone against Black people and one is white people against everyone. And it kind of puts, you know, lumps people like me who are neither Black nor white, you know, it kind of like helps me understand where I stand in terms of just the US legal system. So for example, like the line of school segregation cases, at first it was the Plessy versus Ferguson, you know, separate but equal is okay. And it really was like white schools and Black schools. And it really was a Black versus white issue. But then later on, when there was a Chinese girl who wanted to go to the white school, because she says, well, I'm not Black, so why should I go to the Black school? And the Supreme Court said, all right, but you're not white. And so then it became very clear it wasn't just Black versus white, it was this white exclusivity. And there's another line of cases of citizenship where it was, you know, well, you can't be a citizen because you're Black, right? And then that's where it starts from. But then it also, and then the next person is a person of Japanese descent, and they said, well, you're not Caucasian. And so it kind of carves in a little bit. But then there's someone from India who's like, well, I'm Caucasian. And they said, oh, but you're not white. And so like every case refines it down to this is white supremacy, and that's really what we're protecting. And so I think knowing that history really helped me understand that our government really is built on white supremacy. It's not just anti-Blackness. It just happens that, you know, Black people in this country by far had it the worst. But, you know, it's not just anti-Black. It really is white supremacy. So I just want to push back a little bit on that because that was very helpful for me to see that. And I think that also ties in with Nick's comment about the Asian Americans and Latinx Americans, how some of them don't really see themselves as being oppressed, because I think maybe if they knew that history, they'd realize like, oh, just because me personally, I'm accepted in certain situations doesn't mean that that the government and the legal structure is working for me.
You know, and I'm going to renege on being brief in my answers because my dad was an attorney in Cook County, Chicago, which is one of the most racist counties. And he graduated from University of Chicago Law School in 1932 and actually was a class valedictorian and found out in 1975 when he was an administrator at another university. So yeah, I'm pretty clear that the laws, because like I've heard the lectures, that the laws are really focused on white supremacy, and it's not, it's for the protection of white people. One of the recent conversations that I've had was, you know, there was really, if from my perspective, I think there was no reason for a 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. We could have just had the 13th Amendment. But the way the legal system works is you have to allow for loopholes. And that's why there's like a case about, you know, Chinese, case about Indians, case about Japanese. And, you know, I'm sure if we really look at it deeply, there's a case about every ethnicity. But at the end of the day, it's really about they don't want land ownership to go to people who are not white. They don't want and then the land ownership is tied to whether or not you can vote. And we can't, heaven forbid, that we have people that are not white voting, because then that's going to skew who the lawmakers are. And then if the lawmakers look different, they're going to think different. And then there's less protection for our station in life. And so, yeah, history is super important. I think that if the educational system was changed to only teach history, there would be we would all get along we'd understand each other better, and we'd be a lot more intelligent in our choices, because it's all the things cumulatively that we are keeping ourselves safe from. I was reading an article, what was it, about psychological safety, and it just screamed white supremacy to me. I'm like, how dare you, at a time like this, two white women produce something like this, talking about psychological safety, just, it makes us all feel better, and we'll just be all kumbaya. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so except for there's only psychological safety for you because you're white, and you can say that. There was another article, someone was talking about the bystander effect, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically it was a Harvard study. In this case, it was about a white woman that had been stabbed multiple times in front of, like, a whole bunch of people, but nobody did anything, because they were just, if someone doesn't speak up, I'm not going to speak up, right? Except for that again, I feel is like, it's not a justification for behaviors and for choices. And there's nothing to, I guess I'm sidebarring now, but just to focus on the legal aspect of this, we have to really get in there and change the laws. And that's why it matters, the things that are going on. And that's why it's better to not protest, but to get an audience with the legislators, so that, and present these kind of things, because the average legislator, they have a really good intern or person on staff to protect their position and their status, by making sure that they know what will be aligned with their platform, which is not necessarily aligned with what their constituency needs. So
I think too that as white women, but in the past, what I would have just said is a woman. As a woman, I was always like, well, I'm in this minority box too, right? And we now know that I am coming to terms with the privilege that I'm bringing to the table, and that right now, my voice is, like, right now we are talking very much about the Black experience in America. But it's important that we look at each of those experiences as we start to do the work, right? Because I unfortunately, I would love to disagree, but no, our country was built on white supremacy, and now is the time to change that. So I appreciate both of those comments, and Cordelia, I appreciate you going long on it as well. And Phyllis, I really appreciate you kind of being so open and honest. So thank you. It really gives me a lot more to think about. The other thing is, in line with both of what you are saying, is in massage in general, we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. We have very few educators that are not white. In the field, I don't know what the breakdown is in any other demographics, but I can tell you in the field, we are 80% women and 20% men. And in leadership roles, we are, and educator roles, we are the opposite or more, in terms of, we go first by white men, followed by white women, and there is very little voice. So we have a long way to go. I know one of our organizations put out something on cultural competency, and it was egregious. It included clips from Dr. Phil, which it was a great, it might've been a good episode, but it was Dr. Phil. So I was just like, I don't understand where that's coming from. Every moderated part of that course was done by someone white. After you took your test, your extra credit included clips from people of color. Literally an afternote. It was so ridiculous. And I sent them a private email. I'm still coming to terms with calling people out. I sent them a private email, and I have to look today, but I had to follow up with them, and the follow-up was, we're looking into changing the course. Nothing on the front end, no original post changes, nothing. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do, and a big majority of our massage therapists consider themselves healers and feel we're immune to all of that. And we really need to start saying, no, we are not. And no, we can't see people every way the same. So let's really understand that. And this positive conversation goes a long way for that. I promise I'm not going to interrupt anymore. It's so hard for me, so hard. I'm learning. Rachel, you had some notes. Do you want to expand on that?
I was just saying that, Cordelia, I feel like I had a similar experience in Atlanta too. I was born and raised in Atlanta, and I'm very grateful for it. I've been actually thinking about this a lot over the last couple weeks because, and I had a talk with my dad, who was a physician assistant in the local jail in Atlanta, and we talked about, how it was in the jail, and how, his experience working with and seeing patients that were Black and in the jail, and his experience with the different sheriffs. And he told me one time that he knew that if this one cop was on duty and my dad was working, that he knew he was going to have to stitch up somebody's head every time.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was an eye-opener for me. And it was just that, but not to make light of the situation, but my dad said it didn't matter if they were white or Black. He was going to have to stitch up somebody's head. He was an aggressive person, cop to begin with. But I was very fortunate that when I grew up in elementary school and in middle school, I did have Black friends, and I miss them a lot. And I miss just the cultural diversity that I was exposed to as a young child. And then when I came to Virginia, I realized this a couple weeks ago, like I didn't have many friends of color, and that was unfortunate. Both cultures are in the South, or both states are in the South, but it's so different, So I felt like, my parents made somewhat of an effort to allow me to be with I don't even know how to say it. So like
I know. I mean, growing up in Atlanta, as a northern Black person was awkward. But I have to say that white people there, they will smile in your face and not stab you in your back. They'll tell you exactly that you're a nigger to your face. And I appreciate that. And whereas in DC, they will smile in your face and they won't stab you in your back either. They do something way more colorful. They just cut your dress up, and then when you walk away, it falls off. You know what I mean? Like that kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that is like a takeaway is how do we diversify our relationships without tokenizing people, right? That is something that I'm struggling with right now. How do we do that? And two, how do we recognize, right? How do we recognize the friends that we've had in the past while still understanding that, especially as I have to speak to this as a white woman, but that I'm coming to that perspective as a white woman. So the fact that I had diversity in my past doesn't mean, oh, I'm good, right? Oh, I've done the work. Because again, that's first of all tokenizing a friendship, and so I think that my takeaway is from that question, Rachel. So thank you so much for sharing. Is how do I diversify without tokenizing? Does that make sense?
I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's a two-way street again, right? Because people of color have got to want to feel safe and trusted, psychological safety, right? With you, to want to be your friend. That's a really individual thing, you know? It's a work in progress, but I'm going to have to run. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Cordelia. I appreciate all your time today. I know that this has definitely, having an open conversation like this, I feel so privileged to have you do this for us. I'm really thankful for it. I know it's created more work for me, but in a really good way. I think it's wonderful. So thank you so much. Do you have any parting words, or if you need to go, I can wrap up on my own.
I mean, I just want to leave you with this. This has been an excellent opportunity, you know, to share today. And I just really want everyone to view what's happening right now as the new Renaissance, you know, like age of enlightenment. And whatever you can, I invite you to do the work and do the research for yourself, introspect deeply, and bring something to the conversation. Don't wait for me to tell you what to do or how to think or how to be. You decide to be your higher self. And that is how we can release all the things who we were before and come into our higher self.
Thank you so much, Cordelia. And Cordelia, if people, I know that this is kind of a little bit part of the work that you do with people in your day-to-day job or day-to-day career. If people want to find out more about the work that you do, where can they go?
They can go to my website. It's my name, CordeliaGaffar.com. And for those of you that are here today, if you're free at 2:00 on Saturday, I am actually having an event that will help you with what I just said. It's literally called Release and Be Your Higher Self. So you can reach out to me privately about that if you want.
Great. Well, Cordelia, thank you so much. I know we have a lot of takeaways, and I really do appreciate it. If anyone wants some kind of additional resources, I know I had just finished reading the book White Fragility, and the title alone was really, really hard for me to kind of deal with, but it was really good. It spoke to white peers, which was something Cordelia talked about earlier. In the show notes, there is a link to the article that she was speaking of, so please feel free to check that out. Additionally, I do have a recent blog post. It is geared more towards massage therapists, but it gives some race and cultural competency courses and articles. And while it's geared towards massage and fitness professionals, I think that a lot of those resources are great for everyone, including the implicit bias, not study, but you can do a quick quiz. I don't know what the word is escaping me right now, but it's very insightful. So I would definitely check out those resources as well. I want to thank everyone for participating today. As you saw when you came on, there was a slight disclaimer, but we did record this today, and we will be posting this. So for a greater audience to share as well. So I appreciate your openness. I am still working on getting Nova Weekend Warriors back on a regular schedule. And it's not quite there yet, but we will do that soon. Typically, we are focused around health, wellness, and fitness professionals. and clients. But right now, I think it's very important to give a voice to the movement that should have been happening and should have already been happening. But it is happening now, so we will continue to give a voice to that. Cordelia, thank you so much. Everyone today, thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.